And we're back for another drawing in the dark. My name is Levi Smith. I draw and tattoo for a living, and today we're going to draw a picture of Kang the Conqueror from Marvel Comics. This is my first time back making videos since November of 24, and January 25 is turning out to be quite the challenging start to a new year. This one's about 20 minutes after being sped up a bit and edited, so let's get to it. As usual, I start out with some light indications of where the figure will be centered. I like to start off with the torso and extend the head and limbs off of there. Just a bunch of rough circles and scribbly ovals to figure out where everything is going. Since I'm drawing this in pen, I have to keep my lines really light in case I change my mind or have to correct something later on. I also want to fill the page. These exercises are best done bigger rather than small. Though there's a good time and use for thumbnail drawing, this isn't the one. Once I've got my general figure laid out, I'll start to dial in on the finer parts of the layout, the face, specific forms for the anatomy, and hands. You'll notice that I changed the right forearm before I work in some of the hand structure. Notice I'm still keeping my lines light as I work out these anatomy elements. With the face, I use this modified Loomis method. You'll notice for the eyes, I split the eyeball in half for the eyebrow. One thing with drawing as fast and as loose as I am here, some elements like the center line for the face get a bit off, but it's part of the charm. And use a wide open mouth for some aggression in the face. And notice the chin is closer to the mouth to help angle the head and jaw more downward. Over the head, I want to add Kang's helmet. It's important to think of a helmet as being on the head and build up the volume and depth of form. You'll notice I pause from time to time as I'm making sure to get the design features right. Let's just make sure to get the design features right on the helmet details. I'll add in some slit eyes just under the eyebrow and connecting to them in the inner corners and accent the eye socket spaces under the eyes. I'll define the bottom of the nose and upper lip before adding some teeth. I'll add some eyebrow scowl lines and a side bridge to the nose before working on some shading indicators. Let's give Kang the distinctive lines down his face. Are they scars? Some technology? I have no idea. I'll move to the shoulder pad and chest area, blocking out the basic design patterns here. In some of these areas, I add a little line ridge to show a bit of layering and dimension to the different elements of his armor. Under his shoulder pads, he's wearing this flowing robe-like tunic like in a classical comic fashion, all tucked into the rest of his armor. It's an odd design choice in my opinion, though it did connect Kang and He Who Remains in the MCU in a cool way. Here I want to keep it loose and not lose the forms of the body. I'm no master of fabric, but the basic understanding is to know where things bunch up, stretch out, and pinch to keep everything from looking too stiff or illogical. I decided to give him a bit more belt than my reference, and play with shapes and shading to suggest complexity. and it contrasts with the more flowy lines of the tunic. For this forearm, I changed the curve a bit to show the arm bent and coming toward us more. Though I could have put more foreshortening here, I didn't. And unfortunately, that's as much of the right hand you'll get to see. I'll try to frame the drawings in the camera better for next time. I work out the fingers almost like tater tots on strings to get this classic 90s comic hand. Moving to the cloth that drapes over the crotch. Is there a name for that bit of fabric? A kilt? A skirt? It's not that, I know, but there's got to be some name for it. I do keep the full detail more on the edges of the fabric and legs. It just seems to work better that way in an illustration. A bit more definition to the leg lines and adding a knee and lower leg to the left leg. While these proportions are a bit off, it still kind of works. I take a minute and add some jagged rubble behind the figure, just following a simple 3D box logic. The lower leg here is too short, but I'm not sure how to fix it. I'll add some random detail here and there before adding some tears and burn holes to the fabric, just to reinforce that he's in a battle. As well as add some cracks to his shoulder pad armor. Then we'll finally move to this left hand up here, which is still oddly undefined compared to the rest of the figure work. I wasn't really sure what to do with this hand, so I kept it basic, an outstretched hand that at first seemed like a decent size, but ended up a struggle the whole way through. I didn't mind the hand itself, it just never seemed to fit right. And a bit more rubble here and there. And again, we're off the bottom of the frame. I work out a little bit of the energy elements around his hands, but I'm not sure if he actually had any energy projection powers, but it's something I went with. Then back to the face for more detailing, the teeth, as well as refining some of the aspects of the helmet. Also note that my line work slowly gets darker and heavier as I work through the sketch layers. This is the point where I tend to start adding more specific kinds of detail and refinements of the lines I want to keep or develop. And we'll move to a bit more damage detail to the shoulder pads, a bit more refinement to the helmet details here, the details on the neck here mark the beginning of the darker elements and some shading. I'll add some depth effects by darkening lines away from my light source, which is above and to the right of the viewer. Then I'll continue to refine and darken lines I want to keep. And by keep, I mean reinforce. We have to keep all the lines with pen. But it is kind of important to understand that you should probably be using pencil, and think of this in comic book terms as penciling versus inking, where this is all of the exploratory structural design work that then later would be inked either with a light board, maybe in this case, or scanning it and then inking it digitally. Always think of this, what I'm doing here, is like the rough initial penciling stages of, say, like a comic book drawing. Coming back to the face, we're about halfway through the video now. I'll darken and shape the eyes, nose, and other facial features. And add some simple iris and eyebrow details to the eyes. As for the mouth, just darkening a line with the right intention can add just the right amount of depth without shading or any kind of black fill. Then a bit of shading inside the mouth to define the teeth and suggest a tongue, and thickening the lines of the chin and some of the shadow lines in the helmet. I prefer to build up the line thickness and shading elements in a piece like this, especially with pen, as it's always possible to add more than to take away. I figure that's a connection to pen drawing and tattooing, though I promise I don't tattoo like this. Though I often will design tattoos in a similar manner, except digitally with Clip Studio, no Apple, but I'll do a clean line layer that's used for the actual tattoo itself. And now we're full on into the hat shading. Just a bunch of quick and light lines for shadow here. And I'll come in and darken some nooks and crannies. This belt still needs some refinement and shading to make more sense. Then we'll shade around the nose a bit and finally give this guy some eyebrows and shade the side of the face here a bit. Back to some damage detail, and adding a few tears in the tunic before a light layer of hat shading, going darker on the undersides and folds. More shading and details. To be honest, Kang was never really a character or villain that stood out to me when I was reading superhero comics as a kid. And I was excited to see the MCU interpretation and loved Jonathan Majors' take on the character. It was such a letdown when he was taken off the project and Marvel had to change directions. And no comment on what Disney felt that they had to do, we still lost a great actor and a potentially great villain. Though, Ant-Man should have died at the end of Quantumania. It's not like they couldn't have brought back an alternate version. More shading and details in the face. I'll add some darker shading to the armpit of this arm, as well as add a bit of shading to define the arm in general. And now, more work on this hand. I felt that the foreshortening was way off, and I should have made the hand bigger, and the detail in the shading just seemed to keep making it look smaller. After this heavy shading to the hand itself, I'll add some more details to the energy emissions. The energy being a bit scribbly adds to the effect, I think. I'll move to the other hand here, where you can barely see what's going on. But I'm defining the energy more here before adding shade to the arm. And in shading these fingers, I give them a bit of space in between the finger sections, just so that things don't like merge together and get confusing. I'll shade in these legs, mostly on the inner and undersides. We'll add some more shading in the kilt, or skirt. And into the other leg, before getting caught up again in some random details. More rubble. More rubble and debris. This lower leg needs some detail, though I'm not sure what to do with it still. I add some cross-hatching to the hatching on this leg, building up a few different shades in that thigh. And tease working on that lower leg and knee before wandering to something else. And I'll start shading and detailing in some rubble, just about anything but working on that leg again. The The shading in the rubble and background does add a lot towards the general atmosphere and setting of the character. It helps to have them feel like they're somewhere rather than floating in space. Here's some ground detail you can't see. And yeah, that's it. We're done here. F that leg. I did do a little bit of boldening of the contour lines around the figure off camera. Honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to use this one to post, but reviewing it, I liked it more after a couple of days than I did right after I drew it. And sometimes it's just like that when making art. You'll love it, hate it, and learn to be okay with it and hate it all over again. This wasn't my most enjoyed process or piece, but it has some merits in it, somewhere. It's okay. Thanks for watching along. If you got this far, give it a like. And if you haven't, consider subscribing for more content like this. I like drawing stuff in this way without a major plan. Just a simple concept and a pen, and off we go to see where it ends up. I hope you check out my other videos and follow along for more. See ya.